I'm not a big fan of the guy we're gonna see in the hot seat tonight. Victor Gao is a former Chinese government official, pretty high ranking. I mean, he wasn't like running the country or anything, but pretty high ranking, working with the leadership of China. And the only reason most Westerners know about Victor Gao is because Victor Gao goes on a lot of Western media. Let's see if I can find a picture of the guy. 1 second. We'll just skip to mid this video, just play some footage. And when he goes on the Western press, and there are other people who will go and try to represent China's position in the Western press, the thing that I always appreciated about Victor Gao is that he was blunt. In most of the circumstances, he can be wiggly, he can be slippery, but when he believes something, he says it, and he says it generally clearly. At least you get an idea of what he's saying, but he's also completely unwilling to really appeal to American sensibilities from my interactions with him. So I see him as a semi-honest interpretation of someone aligned with the Chinese government in their perspective, trying to show their perspective a lot more, and so that's useful. But I also find him extremely frustrating, and I find him extremely hypocritical, and I think that's an outgrowth of the Chinese government being extremely frustrating and extremely hypocritical, but also maybe just personality type. And now, I will say that Mehdi Hasan being the one to do this, I think is good. I think this being on head-to-head, which has now come back for the first time. I was a huge fan of head-to-head when Mehdi Hasan did it back in the day. I'm super excited for it. I'll probably watch the other one where he has the Israeli historian on at some point, but I want to start with this one because I know Victor Gao, and I want to see him I want to see the grill a little bit tonight. Let's check it out. Also, I warn you though, don't check out like this, because the way I found out about this video is I was checking out the other like smaller versions of this that were uploaded, like different clips, like this one, like Victor Gao being really hypocritical on Ukraine, which we're gonna watch later. Don't go into the comment sections under these. Don't, if you have any value for your brain, okay? I'll tell you, I've probably taken a decent amount of brain damage from like backblast and large sounds from explosions and stuff. None of it was as damaging as going through a comment section in an Al Jazeera video. Okay, let's check this out.
From Ukraine to Gaza, the world seems more divided and uncertain than it's been for years. Global powers and Western alliances have been put to the test. And amid the turmoil, China is rising to challenge the world order. Chinese President Xi Jinping, now in his third term in office, has high ambitions.
新征程上 我们的前途一片光明，但脚下的路不会是一片坦途。
Territorial disputes have sparked fears of a larger conflict that could have regional and global implications.
You have approached the waters near Chinese Renai Reef,
including in the contested waters of the South China Sea.
That's your curse. Live and keep foul. Over.
It's crazy. It's like there's territorial waters that are internationally recognized as Filipino, and Chinese Coast Guard ships would just go up to these fishermen and just start hosing them down with water cannons. And people are like, oh, it's water, who cares? Like, there's a reason why, like, when you look at a lot of those old protest footage in the United States during the Civil Rights Movement, it's so harrowing seeing people like fall over from like fire hoses. Those things hurt. They'll peel off your skin. Under certain circumstances, they can actually kill people. And they're just hosing them down, ramming them, sometimes detaining them, trying to harass these people who have fished in these waters for generations to extend China's territorial claims that are recognized by nobody but China. And it's gotten to the point where the Chinese government is so influential and so powerful that the Filipino government was just thinking of just, okay, working with them to some extent, maybe just cede them and maybe we can get some fishing rights in our own land. It was really sad. Now, it flips back and forth from the Filipino government if they're going to work with the Chinese on this, if they're going to lean on American support to try to challenge them. But in the courts where they did challenge them, the courts came back and said, look, we mediated this. We looked at the facts. This is Filipino territory. And the Chinese, after agreeing to have it mediated by an international court, then just ignored the decision. It really is a crazy example of just China's complete disregard for these institutions after going to them and being like, okay, yeah, we'll use these institutions, we'll be okay with these institutions if they can assist us here in this proceeding. And then when it did not go their way, never mind, who cares about the institution? China's not the only country to do this, but in this instance, it was particularly blatant.
And in Taiwan, where the threat of a Chinese military invasion looms larger. Meanwhile, at home, attacks on basic freedoms and human rights have become more severe, like in Xinjiang, where China continues to commit serious human rights abuses, some say a genocide, against the Uyghur Muslims. So, how far will China's autocratic vision reach? And will long-simmering tension with the West hit a boiling point? I'm Mehdi Hasan, and I've come here to London's legendary Conway Hall to go head-to-head with Victor Gao. He's Vice President of the Center for China and Globalization in Beijing, former interpreter for the late Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping, and a proud defender of the People's Republic. I'll ask him about China's global ambitions and its aggressive crackdown on human rights and civil liberties. Tonight, I'll also be joined by three experts. Stephen Chan, a professor at the University of London's School of Oriental and African Studies. Rehan Assad, a human rights lawyer of Uyghur heritage. And Martin Jakes, author of the bestseller When China...
I like this format. I like having these guys in the crowd to go to quickly and be like, what do you have to say? How do you respond to that? I like this. I like this format a lot.
...rules the world, and a political commentator on China. Victor Gao, thank you so much for joining me on Head to Head this evening here in London.
Thank you for having me.
China has upped its military spending. It's expanding its nuclear arsenal. It now has the biggest navy in the world. Chinese President Xi Jinping has said that the country's military should be capable of, quote, fighting and winning wars, and told the military to focus all your energy on fighting, improve your capability to win. Victor, who do you want to fight and who do you want to win against?
First of all, the Chinese military spending is the second largest in the world, but it is only a fraction of that of the United States. And China...
Yeah, okay. I will say that is true, but I will also say that when people like measure like American spending versus Chinese spending just in pure dollar terms, that's not really an accurate representation of how much value each is getting out of their defense dollar. While the United States spends more, we have the center of the international arms trade right out of Washington, D.C., baby. Like, I'm not saying that with necessary pride. I'm just saying that's just the case. An American dollar doesn't necessarily go as far in production in the United States as it does in China. $5 here travels differently than $5 down a production line in China. The amount of artillery, amount of explosive powder, the amount of propellant, the amount of everything that you need, the amount of money that is allocated, like $1,000 will go further in China than it will here. And so while it is true that the United States spends more, if you adjust for how far those dollars actually take you, it doesn't even out, but it does adjust quite significantly. I just wanted to give that context because just like a pure price-to-price comparison, like, you know, it's like, for example, like $5 in Ukraine will get me a lot farther than $5 in the United States due to a bunch of things, like labor costs, for example.
Has a very difficult geopolitical situation. China has 14 land neighboring countries altogether and 6 maritime nations for China. Therefore, China's defensive in nature, is not for fighting anyone except those who want to invade China or to launch a war against China. China's military spending is for peace rather than war, and war will be forced upon China, and China need to fight back.
You say it's for peace, but your neighbors don't agree. Your neighbors are...
Okay, let me pause this for a second. Sorry to interrupt, but this is what I'm talking about, purchasing power. So there's the official estimates at the top of like China versus US military spending, and then you could see if you include purchasing power, it does adjust significantly. Now, that doesn't make it one-to-one. Like, the United States still spends significantly more. The United States still, like, invests more capital overall into defense. We have some of the most innovative defense companies in the world in the United States. But I just like to give people this context because I think that most people don't have it.
Pretty worried about you.
Is for peace rather than war, and war will be forced upon China, and China need to fight back.
You say...
Well, can I just say quickly, when they say that the military is for peace and not war, and we need to fight back, to be clear, the current Chinese government has said that they will reunify with Taiwan, that they will do it one way or the other, even if they have to use force. Meaning that if the Taiwanese just refuse to reunite, and they do that forever and ever and ever, the implication being that the Chinese will use force to force them to join mainland China and the communist government, or communist, depending on what you define as communist, but you know, the party in China's government. That, to me, is not defensive.
It's for peace, but your neighbors don't agree. Your neighbors are pretty worried about you. You go through the list. Japan has sounded the alarm, saying your military buildup is very serious concern to them. India is worried about China on its border. And the Philippines president has warned that China is becoming a more pronounced and worrisome threat, he says. Those are the elected governments of countries representing over 1.6 billion people in Asia. This is not the United States. This is not the West. These are your Asian neighbors saying, we're worried about China.
Maybe you mentioned three of the neighboring countries of China. Let's talk about one of the...
Yeah, what about Taiwan? Oh, wait, Vietnam. Wait, no, sorry. I'm trying to be more serious.
Each of them, very quickly. Japan unconditionally surrendered not only to the United States, but also to China in 1945. And if you read very carefully the unconditional surrender document that Japan signed, then you will know how Japan needs to conduct its foreign affairs as well as its military troops with China and with all those countries that Japan unconditionally surrendered for. India is a great nation, and there is a territorial dispute between China and India, but that dispute was not created by China, neither was it created by India. It was created or left behind by the British Indian government.
That's a great history lesson. But right now, China, in 2024, the defense spending is going up by 7%, the most for 5 years. You've had 29 consecutive years of military expenditure growth, the most of any country in the world. Since 2022, China has increased military drills around Taiwan. It's escalated since the new Taiwanese president was inaugurated in May. China is not a fan of him.
They were like, quick, that 80-year-old American woman wants to take a plane ride to Taiwan, fire missiles into the ocean. Rational foreign policy. Sorry. I mean, of course, there's signaling involved. There's a reason as to why they did it. It's just crazy when you paraphrase it without all the official terminology. Quick, old woman in the sky, fire at the ocean, pew pew pew. Foreign policy. A lot of posturing, really.
Since then, there's been almost daily activity involving China's warships, drones, cyber attacks against Taiwan. China is getting ready to invade Taiwan, isn't it?
There is only one China. Taiwan is part of China, and the government of the People's Republic of China.
Someone said Taiwan. It feels like when I was a kid, there was these little animatronics we had for like the holidays that we'd put out, and one of them was like my grandfather got. He loved it. It was a little Santa Claus. He'd walk by, he'd go ho ho ho. He'd turn around, pull down his pants. He'd be in his underwear. And he goes Merry Christmas, and he'd fart or something. And then we had another one for like Halloween where he'd pass. It was a skeleton that was in a cage. He'd go rah, and he'd rattle in the cage. I feel like that's what I just saw happen. I feel like that's what I just saw Victor Gao do, where he had like a voice code, like somewhere like in a chip in the back of his head, and he heard the word Taiwan, and then like the official programming like kicked in, like Taiwan. That's what it like. The thing is, you can disagree on Taiwan, but he just like suggests just look at the way that how Mehdi asked the question, and then look at the non-casual way in when he responds. And maybe it's just Victor Gao's mannerisms, I don't know. But it's just like immediately, like, bam, get on message.
Then there's been almost daily activity involving China's warships, military drills around Taiwan. It's escalated. China in 20...
Remember, the question is about escalating military action around Taiwan, which could lead to war? That's the question. And instead of talking about the possibility of escalation and stuff, we've now moved over to just like, well, should Taiwan even exist in the first place? Immediately, because we're to the official talking point. We're only 5 minutes in. I told you this was going to be a bit.
2024, the defense spending is going up by 7%, the most for 5 years. You've had 29 consecutive years of military expenditure growth, the most of any country in the world. Since 2022, China has increased military drills around Taiwan. It's escalated since the new Taiwanese president was inaugurated in May. China is not a fan of him. Since then, there's been almost daily activity involving China's warships, drones, cyber attacks against Taiwan. China is getting ready to invade Taiwan, isn't it?
There is only one China. Taiwan is part of China, and the government of the People's Republic of China is the sole legitimate government for the totality of China. The exact status between the two sides of the Taiwan Strait is the unfinished civil war back in 1949. So ever since the beginning of the 1980s, China does not want to use a war to solve this unification problem.
You don't want to use a war, but you're surrounding it with ships, drones, cyber.
It's kind of hard to say like, oh, it's an unfinished civil war when like all the people who fought the civil war are dead and or dying, and the people who are not even alive 20 years after the civil war ended or would be the ones that would fight it now. I mean, it's like, oh, you know, oh, there's still an active war in the Korean Peninsula. Kind of, yeah, technically. But it's more like, oh, did you know technically there's still a war happening in Korea? Like, oh, technically, according to China, the civil war's still on. Well, yeah, but if there was if China was to try to take Taipei tomorrow, we wouldn't say, oh, the civil war is recommenced. We'd call it in the history books, oh, the you know, Chinese Taiwan War, or we'd call it something along those lines. Like, I don't know. I get what they're trying to say, but like, it's the opening of a new history book. Taiwan has traveled in a totally different cultural direction, governmentally, after the White Purges ended, after the government crumbled. They democratically transitioned, is what the majority of the Taiwanese wanted, is what they strive for, it's what the democratic opposition fought for, it's what the government gave, and when the government lost, when the nationalists lost, they stepped out of power. The people could have chosen, we want to do Mao-style communism. They could have chosen, we want to be part of Xi Jinping's grand vision for the future. They didn't choose that in Taiwan. They chose a democratic alternative. The standard of living is higher in Taiwan. They have higher freedom of the press, more freedom of assembly, more freedom of speech, more freedom when it comes to their businesses. I mean, they can have free unions uncontrolled by the government. Oh my God, can you believe that? A free and independent union, which is, you know, kind of an important part of like a strong independent labor system. I'm not a huge fan of all the government unions. Anyway, point is, the Taiwanese chose a different path. They've traveled that path. Most young Taiwanese identify more with being Taiwanese than even Chinese. So just trying to say, oh, it's an unfinished civil war when so much time has passed is like saying, you know, if the British were to try to reinvade the United States, oh, I don't know, it's, you know, we're just finishing this English-speaking dispute. It's like a lot of time has passed. It hasn't been as long as that, but it's been pretty long. Another 10 years, and everybody that was alive during the Civil War will probably be dead. At least all the people who like fought it, all the people who were leaders from the time are dead.
Attacks and making lots of threats.
Each time when the separatists in Taiwan want to push...
Like, who needs to die over Chiang Kai-shek and his dead, and him, or Mao, or any of these people who gave these orders to fight a war that is long over? Why reignite it? Why, if these people are Chinese, why such eagerness to bomb one of the most densely packed cities if you exclude, one of the most densely packed countries in the world if you exclude the mountainous regions?
The edge of the envelope, they will come across more and more demonstration of the commitment of the Chinese nation to eventually achieve peaceful reunification or otherwise. That's the litmus test.
Your defense minister said anyone who dares to pursue independence for Taiwan will be crushed into pieces and face destruction. Sounds like a truly peaceful guy.
That's a real statement. Because if the separatists really want to push the edge of the envelope with the aid of some big country, for example, which wants to use Taiwan as a proxy in its own geopolitical rivalry against China, then wait until you see what will happen. Reunification will be achieved, and China is
You want to know what would be a smart way to get the United States to not be able to use Taiwan to its own defense needs or its own defense ends? If you didn't threaten to annihilate it at every moving second and make it so that there's only one option for national survival in Taiwan, and that is defense planning with the United States, because the United States is the geopolitical pole that keeps their existence alive.
It's the only permanent member of the United Nations Security Council which has not yet achieved.
Do you think, like, what if the deal from China was like, hey, no more defense plans with the United States, we leave you guys alone, we won't invade you. You can't be used as an asset against us. Do you think the Taiwanese wouldn't consider that, wouldn't take that deal? But it's not that. That's not the deal. Just like that wasn't the deal that was offered to the Ukrainians. It has to be on China's terms and their country, their way, their people, their model. It couldn't, I mean, the one country, two systems thing didn't even last in Hong Kong. And now you want to expand that to 25 million more people? There's a reason why support for reunification dropped exponentially after the Hong Kong protests were cracked down upon, because the Taiwanese people didn't want that for themselves.
The complete reunification.
Well, I'm always amused with this phrase reunification, because if it's one China, then clearly it's not one China. Clearly you're accepting by definition if you need to reunify it. They are doing their own thing. And why this obsession with Taiwan? You are a country of 3.7 million square miles, a population 60 times that of Taiwan, economy 20 times the size of Taiwan. Why are you obsessed with Taiwan? Why not just leave them be?
In terms of defending China's sovereignty and territorial integrity, any inch of land is not 1 inch too much. Any one single person is not one person too many.
Remember this logic when we get to the topic of Ukraine later.
Why not just leave them be?
In terms of defending China's sovereignty and territorial integrity, any inch of land is not 1 inch too much. Any one single person is not one person too many. So we need to achieve reunification as
Even though they don't want to be part of your country. 12% of the people of Taiwan say they want to reunify with China. 12%. You can't get more unpopular than that in that.
Mehdi, it's not up to the people in Taiwan to decide about the one China policy.
You're very blunt in your disregard.
My God. Can I just say, that's why I like Victor Gao. Because that was blunt, it was direct. Later here, and the thing is, I don't like that position. It's gross, it's disgusting, it disregards the locals, it disregards what they want, it disregards the sacrifices they made to bring down the regime of Chiang Kai-shek that Mao couldn't finish off. And when I'm thinking about the ending of the White Purges and all the things that they struggled for, giving that up for what? Nationalism? The ideal, like, historical China that, like, Mao wants to return to, even though Taiwan was never part of the communist state in the mainland China. This isn't like, so they either, you need to bring you back into this they've never been part of this government. The Taiwanese have never signed up for this. They never agreed to this.
For people's views, freedoms, dignity, you say you don't care about what...
But later, I think is going to be a little bit more slippery. And so this right here, I despise the position. I appreciate the bluntness, because this is officially, this is the position of the Chinese government. If every Taiwanese person said tomorrow, never, 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 never will we be part of China again, they would simply say, number one, read your constitution, and number two, we don't care.
What they think. You also said in an interview with the French newspaper Le Monde, once we get the island back, we'll have to ask everyone's origins. Those who have Japanese ancestry, who you basically say constitute 10% of the population, will have to pledge loyalty to reunification in writing, otherwise we'll have to help them leave. You're basically calling for the ethnic cleansing of 2.3 million people in Taiwan.
No, you remember back in 1945, when Japan unconditionally surrendered, a lot of people in Taiwan who originally came from Japan, they were the rulers of Taiwan at the time, they stayed behind because of the magnanimity of the Chinese nation. Now,
oh yeah, like okay, what happened to the people who were there before? What happened? I don't even want to even get into the indigenous Taiwanese conversation. Okay, I don't even want to get into it.
Several decades later,
which has an interesting outgrowth into gun control, but that's a totally different topic.
they account for about 10% of the local population in Taiwan. Now, if you really do your homework, you will realize that those die-hard Taiwanese separatists include many of these Japanese
Completely baseless
Chinese.
things, but okay.
Well,
but you would get rid of them. You would get rid of 2.3 million people.
No, after the reunification, everyone in Taiwan need to make a pledge whether they acknowledge there is only one China and Taiwan is part of China.
And if they don't make that pledge, they're out.
Those who pledge for the one China policy, they are local
by the way,
citizens.
you didn't say everyone. You said of Japanese descent. That is
by the way, if anybody thinks that it would be beneath the Chinese government to make camp-style facilities to put people in who do not agree with the reforming and they're not going to put political prisoners away, I find it extremely naive, especially if the occupation was done by force.
Ethnically, you're picking people by their ethnic heritage, making them do a loyalty test.
But honestly, I think the only difference that would make is that it would be quicker.
They have to get out of the country.
It is not a loyalty test. Here, for example, in Britain, if you are a British citizen, you need to support the monarchy. You cannot say,
I'm standing in Britain. I don't support the monarchy. I don't like King Charles.
No, you cannot say. No,
I just said it.
Mehdi,
I literally just said it.
you cannot take any action to oppose the monarchy system.
But I don't have to sign a pledge saying I support King Charles.
Well, each country is different.
Yeah,
we are talking about
China. China is very different.
And China has one policy which is part of the constitution.
Which involves threatening people in Taiwan who don't want to be part of your country. Let's bring in our panel who are waiting to come in.
Boy, I was waiting for this.
Let's see what they think. I'm joined by Stephen Chan, professor at the University of London School of Oriental and African Studies. If you're in Taiwan today, how worried are you about a looming invasion?
I'm not in Taiwan today. I'm going to be visiting next year. I've been there 5 times in all of the great cities of Taiwan. And what I've noticed most conspicuously is that nobody I've talked to wants to rejoin or reunify with China because of their sense of freedom and their sense of self-determination. So I think that if you're going to say our sovereignty matters more than your...
I don't know how you even appeal to a Westerner while saying things like, what the Taiwanese want just doesn't matter. We don't care. It does not matter. Like, this is zero attempt by Victor Gao to placate for like Western sympathies, which I, again, appreciate through like the bluntness angle and interpreting his position. Because if we were debating this with like a Jackson Hinkle, he would just try to like hip-hop around the fact.
Desire for your own self-determination and freedom, then you're doing something that will not make you popular in Taiwan, and you won't win the argument for Chinese sovereignty over the island.
Martin Jakes is here with us, author of the best-selling book, When China Rules the World. Martin, you've said in the past that China should not be seen through a solely Western lens. So, I agree with you, and there's issues there. But I began the show by asking Victor about Japan and India and the Philippines, separate to Taiwan, just the issues in the region. Do you think China is responsible for some of those issues, all of those issues, none of those issues?
Well, China's obviously involved inevitably in all of those issues. I think that actually, if you look at the rise of China over the last 30, 40 years, spectacular, biggest change we've ever seen in history, really. And inevitably,
that's a hell of a claim, but okay.
Everything in the region, in the world.
The rise of China in the 21st century is the biggest change in history. I'm not going to get nitpicky. It's a gigantic change. The fact that, the literacy rates and whatever, it's great. It's just kind of are we just all in the age of Trumpisms? Everything's the greatest of everything ever, but whatever. Well, I mean, he's a China author, so I understand, Come, please, worry about the topic I'm worried about.
Rise of China over the last 30, 40 years, spectacular. Biggest change we've ever seen in history, really. And inevitably, that is changing everything in the region, in the world. But the remarkable thing, I'd say, Mehdi, about China's rise is how, you quoted the military figures and so on, but China has not fought any wars since 1979. If you compare that with America, Europe, Japan, at the same stage of development, they were extremely aggressive.
Let's talk human rights, Victor. You've called Uyghurs in China's Xinjiang province your brothers and sisters. How do you feel about the fact that at least 500,000, some say more, of your brothers and sisters are being detained in camps by the Chinese government? That's 5% of the adult Uyghur population, one of the highest imprisonment detention rates in the world.
Mehdi, the Uyghurs are a proud ethnic group, one of the 56 ethnic nationalities in China. The Uyghurs, as far as I'm concerned, are my true brothers and sisters. I know many of them. I travel to Xinjiang regularly, and I talk to many of the Uyghurs. Now, if anyone is serious about accusing China of practicing mass injustice...
And you know what they tell me? They say more cameras. You haven't put enough cameras in our community. We need more security cameras. We need more security cameras. 5% isn't a 10%, 15%, Mehdi. That's what one grandma came up to me and she said 50%. She was shoving her husband right in my direction. Sorry, I don't know. I don't really appreciate personal anecdotes like this very much.
Justice to the Uyghurs? Give me the evidence.
It'd be one thing if he would acknowledge, like, hey, there's undue surveillance or things like that. But just like the happy sunshine view of all the Uyghurs are happy and they're all proudful. Like, it's just like the party view, but it is what he believes. At least I think it's what he believes. It's impossible to know with the suit.
Human Rights Watch say 500,000 people detained over the years in recent years.
You keep quote Human Rights Watch, and I tell you...
Do you know where they got those numbers from?
I don't know.
Can I tell you?
I don't know.
I thought you were the expert on... You've been to Xinjiang, you've spoken to Uyghurs. You never heard these numbers?
I do not know where did they get the source.
So their source is the Xinjiang High People's Procuratorate, which has published its own statistics, Xinjiang official body, which says it's convicted 540,826 people prosecuted in the region since 2017. The United Nations Office for Human Rights looked at satellite footage. They say 10 to 20% of the population. Amnesty estimates 1 million people.
So the low 5% number comes from the government. The 10 to 20% number comes from satellite photographs. But there's the range from 5 to 20, to 20% being the much higher range, obviously.
In camps. 500,000 is a conservative number.
Mehdi, if you quote that organization, please be assured that that organization has been completely discredited for the false information they came up with.
I love this game we're playing. You give me a source, I give you a source. They're discredited. They've said falsehoods.
Mehdi,
how can let me ask you a question. How many people are in detention in Xinjiang? You give me a number.
Listen. If you look at Xinjiang...
You give me a number.
If you look at... I do not have the number.
Why not?
Yeah.
Hold on. You can't say it's not 500,000 and then say you don't have a number. I have a number. I have sources.
That is wrong.
How many people do you think are detained?
Let me give you my reason.
No.
I go to Xinjiang a lot. I travel almost
So they're your brothers and sisters.
Xinjiang.
You go there a lot, but
yes.
You can't tell me how many people are in detention.
Listen, they are happier. They enjoy their life. They enjoy their Muslim practices and traditions. Listen.
How many people are in detention, Victor?
Mehdi, let me be philosophical.
No, don't be philosophical. Be numerical.
No.
How many people are in detention? Well, you know, Sun Tzu used to say...
How many people are in detention? You said no to 500,000. How about, okay, let's let 250,000.
Let me finish.
Mehdi, but did you ever stop to question if it first was the chicken or if it was first the egg, Mehdi?
My point.
Nope. You answer the question. You can't filibuster, Victor, on the show.
If anyone
how many
promotes
people do you think
independence, they will be dealt with in
Got it.
court.
How many of them are in court and how many in detention?
A very small minority.
So you don't have a number. You say they're all happy, but you won't let in independent investigators. You won't let in journalists to go there.
Why not?
They're not allowed to go there.
It's weird to say that type of thing about, like, when you're talking about, like, detention, and we're talking about, like, numbers like 5%. Like, he should at least give us, like, an idea of a range, because when he's, like, a very small minority, what does that mean? He didn't give us an idea of what that means. Because if you're talking about, like, I don't know, like, how many Americans are unhappy with the administration? They're like, oh, like 10, 20%. Like, oh, that is a small minority. That's great. But if you're talking about something like 5 to 6% for, like, murder rates, or, like, something that's much, 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 much worse, like, for example, mass detention, 5% is actually an incredibly big number. 10 to 20% is an astonishing prediction. I mean, an astonishing estimation from satellite photographs. So, like, saying a minority, and you mean like 10% of the population, is it's not. I mean, that's pretty crazy. Like, oh, a minority of the population died of the plague. It was only 20%.
We'll be happy to escort you to Xinjiang.
Really?
I can make that promise.
Really?
I will speak to the Chinese government.
Here's the problem,
to the
Victor.
Chinese
I don't
embassy.
want to escort. I don't want minders. I want to go freely. Will you allow that?
I do not make that decision.
Oh! A moment ago, you were going to make all sorts of interruptions. Suddenly I said, let me go freely and speak to Uyghurs freely. Can I do that with no minders?
I'll be happy.
No Chinese government escort.
I will be happy to make your case.
Oh, just now you said you'd organize it. Now we're about make a case. You can't guarantee. Rehan Assad is a senior fellow at the
Oh, God, dude. He set up his own rake and then proceeded to stomp on it. Oh my gosh. And that's my main thing, because I'll see people like do endless like Twitter threads and Reddit threads trying to be like, the Chinese government, actually this family is perfectly fine, and and they'll try to justify what's going on and talk and justify it, and they'll make these long threads. But the thing that will always keep me 1,000,000% doubtful is just the complete like almost media blackout when it comes to just being able to go out and freely cover these detention centers without being handled. People going around and covering without being handled or followed. Because anytime people report in the area, they're being handled and or followed. And so the unimpeded reporting always makes me nervous. It's like the same thing that scares me about occupied territory in Ukraine, is the fact that the Red Cross cannot access POW centers in occupied territory. And so they don't get to really check the condition of the prisoners. And so many of them end up getting tortured.
Council International.
Actually, the vast majority of them.
Human rights lawyer. You are a Uyghur who Victor says, brothers and sisters. Your literal brother has been held in an internment camp in Xinjiang since 2016, I believe. Rehan, tell us what happened to your brother and what is your response to Victor, to what you've heard, and what is the latest on your brother, if you don't mind sharing with us.
Yeah, my brother Akbar Assad is a prominent tech entrepreneur. In fact, your own media outlet called him a bright star in the tech world. Right before his detention, he was invited on a state gala dinner, and then he disappeared. How could you explain that?
Mehdi, again, in China, we have about 20...
You know, this is a weird position for Victor Gao, because he probably does not know. I mean, unless he was told all the guests and who they were beforehand, maybe he could have done some research, but odds are he has no clue about like all these individual instances. So I don't even know what he would really have to say here if someone's saying, I have personal evidence of detention.
Resedum287 has donated $5. Detainees are happy. Bing Shilling in there.
Bing Shilling. Thank you for the $5.
Muslim ethnic groups. You need to ask one question. Why the extremism existed mostly among the Uyghur communities? Because there are extremists among the Uyghur community who want to separate Xinjiang away from China.
Has your brother been convicted of any crime?
Supported by CIA and other Western organizations.
Okay. Rehan,
that's the real truth.
Hold on.
Talk to the Kazakhs, they don't support.
Has your brother been
Xinjiang
convicted of a crime?
According to UN, there's no trial has taken place. He just forcibly disappeared. Actually, it amounts to enforced disappearance. But according to the Chinese government, he committed a crime of inciting ethnic discrimination while he is systematically oppressed. And when I challenged that decision, because under the Chinese law, if you're committed with the alleged crime, that you have 3 years sentence, but he got 15 years. How do you justify that? Then they switch the crime. So how do you even explain this is a rule of law system? You mentioned that if people are not pro-independent, then they're fine in Xinjiang. My brother by no means is pro-independent. In fact, your media outlet, daily media, invited him to exchange information. Did he split the country when he visited Beijing? Are
you okay with the treatment of her brother?
In front of this very august body, let me make several very brief points. The real crime involved by some of the Uyghur people are agitating for Xinjiang independence.
Stonewall.
They violate the One China policy.
Complete stonewall.
Separate from that, you know, different communities may find their own different problems which need to be sorted out in the course of law. And I hope...
But our brother's been detained for 8 years.
Well, I do not know the charge. I hope I can help you to really look at the case, at the accusation against him.
Yeah,
I hope your brother is not guilty of inciting for separatism of Xinjiang. If that is the case, then let the law take its course.
Well, your media outlet called him a model citizen.
8 years? Could you imagine having your family member put in prison for 8 years for like inciting against the state? And you're like, he didn't do anything. He's not even pro-independent. Well, just if he didn't do anything, don't worry. Eventually he'll get out. Just don't worry. Be happy. Everything's gonna be all right.
who is a promoter of ethnic unity in Xinjiang.
Have you been able to speak to your brother or see him?
No, not at all. Like, you know, for 8 years, he's forcibly disappeared. Up until like last month, for the first time, my parents saw him. What kind of justice system is that? You're making a mockery
You're not
of
just
the rule of
detaining
law.
them, Victor. They're being tortured. Numerous testimonies the UN has collected. Are you okay with that?
Mehdi, when you talk about torture, think about Guantanamo Bay.
Oh, the whataboutisms. Okay, so, well, Victor, this is the problem. Victor Gao will be super blunt in one area. He'll be blunt, but then he'll reach a point where there's not even like a, I feel like he can't even justify it to himself. And so what he'll do is he'll just lock on to a whataboutism. When you talk to him about, you know, for example, the idea of like Russia invading Ukraine, then he'll inevitably say, okay, well, let's talk about Iraq. If you're going to talk about this, then inevitably he's going to talk about Guantanamo Bay. And it's the whataboutism game.
Other than in Xinjiang. Xinjiang is a place of great peace and stability.
The accounts, hold on,
as a
Victor, the
separate
accounts of
country.
detainees include being beaten with batons, electric batons, while strapped in a so-called tiger chair. 158 being subjected to interrogation with water poured on their faces, prolonged solitary confinement, forced to sit motionless on stools for long periods. This, you're okay with this? This is the proud China?
Probably you are reading the case in Iraq committed by the American soldiers.
I'm reading the UN report in August 2022 from detainees who came out of camps in Xinjiang. Your brothers and sisters, but these brothers and sisters you don't seem to give a damn about. How do you know any torture happened in Iraq out of interest?
I know.
How?
I know for sure.
How?
I talked to the Iraqi ambassador in Beijing.
Okay.
He wept in front of me.
And I'm sure Rehan's parents have wept, and you don't seem to care.
And I hope you will tell your brother, be a staunch supporter of one China policy.
Oh my God. I'm sorry. How demented do you have to be? Somebody's brother was disappeared for 8 years. Can't see him. Finally gets to see him for the first time like a month ago. Still, the crimes are getting changed. And your response is, well, make sure that he loves China. Make sure he loves the China. If he loves the China, then everything's good. Everything's Gucci. Well, let's just say for a moment he didn't love the China. Let's say he just didn't love the China. Would that justify this? Can I just throw that out there for a moment? Let's say for a moment he was like, oh no, I don't want to be part of China. Yeah, it'd be cool if East Turkmenistan was a thing. I'm openly in favor of that, and I will say that in public. Should he go to prison then? I would say no.
Be a proud
I cannot
Chinese
tell him he's
wiggle
in prison.
She can't tell him because she can't speak to him because you deny access, Victor.
China.
One thing to like be making a bomb to stuff into a school bus and then ram into a building. It's another thing to be like, I don't like the government, and I think if the government sucks this much, maybe we shouldn't be part of it. And hey, they've done many bad things to our people. Maybe our people should not be loyal to like that. That's a totally different situation. Even though she claims that he didn't even do that.
Victor, she can't speak to him. Are you going to arrange it? Are you going to arrange a visit now?
I'll be happy to help you to make a phone call.
There's a lot of promises being made here, guys. You should follow up on this afterwards.
You are all witnesses.
We are witnesses, indeed. Let me bring in Martin Jakes. Martin, when you hear people say, basically, there's no torture, everyone's making it up, there's nobody in detention, come on, that's ridiculous, is it not, Martin?
Well, I mean, I don't know all the details of the situation in Xinjiang, but clearly there's been a big problem for a long time in Xinjiang in terms of the relationship between the Uyghur and the Han. And that came to a head in 2009 when there was a demonstration and 200 people were killed by the Uyghur. And then the Chinese inflicted the same kind of damage on the Han. So this is a deep problem in my view, and it's not easily passed off. There's no other problem in China of this kind.
Yeah.
But
a lot of people consider
this is a big problem.
That's a pretty big problem.
It's a very big problem for them, yeah. But the other thing, Mehdi, I'd say, is that the point that's being made about separatism is true. That I think that the 30 million Muslims in China, the Hui is the biggest single minority. Yeah. They are completely integrated. But the problem in Xinjiang is clearly the issue of separatism.
Stephen, let me ask you this question. Victor's making a lot of promises tonight about me going to Xinjiang and Rehan going to Xinjiang and everyone's going to be fine. How safe, how okay are you with visiting China? How free do you think you are when you go to China?
When I go to China, and I haven't been for some time, I'm watched almost 24/7. There's always someone I can spot is trailing me. So I know when my hotel room is upgraded suddenly to a spacious suite, I'm now in a place which is bugged. So someone who's a mild critic and a scholarly critic like me doesn't feel safe in China. And by contrast, I feel safer in Taiwan.
Victor, when you hear Stephen say he doesn't feel that safe going to China, prefers going to Taiwan, when we talk about freedom of speech, for example, in China, I live in the United States of America, where I can say that Donald Trump is a, I don't know, hypothetically, an orange-faced narcissist. I also live here in the UK, I'm British. Here you have Rishi Sunak, the former Prime Minister, was called a pint-sized loser by a Labour politician. No one in China has that kind of freedom to talk about their government, to talk about President Xi Jinping in that way. You can't say anything like that. You wouldn't dare say anything like that because you know what will happen to you when you go home. You know what will happen to your family. That's what China is.
Mehdi, if you do anything, write anything, email or chat to your friends about taking anything action against, let's say, Prime Minister of Britain, President of the United States,
I didn't say that.
You'll be dealt with very swiftly.
Victor, you're a master of straw.
You said, so you claim that here in the West, you can critique your government. But did you know if you go on Twitter and say you're going to throw a pipe bomb into Rishi Sunak's home, you'll get arrested? Where's your freedom now, liberals?
That's not what I said. I said Rishi Sunak was called a pint-sized loser. Would you call Xi Jinping a pint-sized loser?
Mehdi, each country has different sensitivities. In UK,
so you're admitting you can't criticize the Chinese government?
No. You can criticize the government if you are positive in your attitude.
You can criticize the government if you're positive?
Yes.
Is that the new philosophy?
No, if you can come up with your...
You've got to come up with nice insults.
No.
What then?
Constructive advice.
Constructive advice.
For example,
oh, I'm loving
in
this.
dealing with the aging population, what should be the government do? What should this governor do?
But you can't say the president's lied. He's a liar.
No, he will be dealt with very swiftly in China. You cannot say...
That's crazy. What, do you guys think the president just doesn't lie in China? That the government doesn't lie? And if you call the government liars, that just should how it should be? Like, just dealt with? Goodbye. Again, zero sympathy for American sensibilities.
That is the most honest thing you've said tonight. Yes. Victor Gao, we're going to take a break. That's part one of Head-to-Head with our guest, Victor Gao. In part two, we'll be talking about President Xi Jinping. We'll be talking about the issue of dictatorship, and we'll hear from our very patient audience here in London's Conway Hall.
Oh, boy. Let's go to part two.
And on Al Jazeera English, my guest this week is Victor Gao, former interpreter to the late...
I'm so happy this show is back. I love this show.
Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping, vice president of the Center for China and Globalization in Beijing, and an ardent promoter of the People's Republic. We're also joined by an expert panel here in London's Conway Hall and a live audience who we're going to hear from shortly. Victor, before we get to the audience, in 2019, on this very show, I asked the question, is Xi Jinping gearing up to be president for life, dictator-in-chief? I mean, he's the most powerful leader of China since Mao. He's abolished presidential term limits. He's now in his third five-year term as president. So I'll ask again tonight, is he now president for life, a true dictator?
For the record, first of all, Chinese President Xi Jinping will never be president for life. There will be a time limit when it...
Yes, because eventually his heart will stop. That is true. I mean, like, I think he's going to rule as long as he physically can. I think he's going to rule as long as he physically can. Quote me on that. As soon as he's too old or sick to rule, he'll let go. Or, worst case scenario, he still won't, which would be very bad for China.
Will be handled according to the Chinese legal system and constitution. Secondly, there is no dictator in China. Why? Because dictatorship simply doesn't work. Democracy means modernization. And how can you explain profound transformation of China over the past 45 years in China if you have dictatorship or authoritarian rule? No. Every leader...
Well, I mean, that will assume that, like, democracy is like a super magic pill that you just, like, oh, wow, my economy's fixed. But look at Mali. What happened to their democratic government? It was overthrown. I mean, the situation's worse than it was before. But I mean, like, democracy isn't a magic pill that solves all your economic issues. It's a mechanism by which you wish to give control of the people, but other things can still divert that control. Corruption, undue bureaucracy, nepotism, all sorts of things.
In China will be put into a team, and teamwork will be.
But like, you can have authoritarianism and still try to get a semi-productive economy or positive parts of your economy, and still have very bad anti-freedom aspects of your economy. I think freer societies usually have better economies on average, but I don't think, like, you know, democracy is a cure-all.
Much more important
Xi Jinping
than
run
individualism.
Teams, Victor. Maybe previous presidents did. Maybe Jiang Zemin or Hu Jintao. Everyone knows Xi Jinping has centralized power, consolidated power, got rid of term limits. You say there's a way to get rid of him, but there isn't actually a legal way to get rid of him. He's in power for life, and he likes being a dictator. Why are we pretending?
Mehdi, allow me to remind you, the Communist Party of China, which is the ruling party of China, has a membership of up to one.
Oh yeah, they won the last election. Yeah, they beat that other party. What was the one before? I forget.
100 million people.
Yeah.
It's well structured. Every province, every state-owned enterprise, etc., will have
But
a
he's the
party
boss.
cell.
There's no division or debate within the Chinese Communist Party.
Listen to me. No single person in China can dictate to a
Really?
population of 1.4 billion people and 100 million membership of the Communist Party of China.
Okay, let's test
That's
that.
a mission impossible.
Let's test that proposition. The president won a vote last year. Won a vote. I'll put that in air quotes. Do you know the tally of last year's presidential vote in favor of Xi Jinping by the National People's Congress, part of that structure you just advertised to us? What was the vote? Can you tell our audience here?
I think it's up to about 100%. That doesn't.
2,952 to 0.
Yes, that's exactly what I said.
Could you not find a few people just to make it look a little even? One or two?
Mehdi, it's not surprising. It's not surprising.
2,952 to 0.
It's
That's
not
one-man rule,
surprising
my
in
friend.
the Chinese system. Everyone supports the Chinese president. That's
You just told us 10 seconds ago there's this huge system, a big party, one guy, and then you're like, oh no, but everyone supports him. 0 votes against him. One person out of 3,000 couldn't say,
He's bloodying his nose pretty hard here. This is the thing. What people will say, defenders of the system would say, it's democracy within a party. Of course, there's only one party, and there's only state-allowed unions, so you can't have like independent unions, and I mean, you can't really have a really independent press, and you can't really critique the government too hard. But it's democracy within the one political party. But see, once you've put these levels of control on speech, on unions, the other ways of the people to organize, and on what parties can run, how you can join the party, what policies you can have within the party. Once all these mechanisms are put in, any deviation from the big man upstairs, not God, but Xi Jinping. Well, I guess it depends where you are. But Xi Jinping, then you can't deviate. You can't break away. You're not allowed to. How is that a democracy if it can't be? If the government can be like, hey, I believe this government's failed in housing policy. We need to take a radical break and move. Could the legislature of China really do that away from his policy?
Xi Jinping, not my guy. One.
What if he is the guy for all the Communist Party of China? You
What
never
if?
know.
Well,
never know.
if that's the case, then your entire first answer is redundant, because it doesn't matter if there's 100 million people.
No.
They all have to follow the leader.
No, he does command huge respect among the Chinese people as well as
You
in
say
the ruling
respect, I
party.
say fear. Do you know how many names were on the ballot papers that were given in 2013? How many names were on the ballot paper when they went to choose the president? Can you tell our audience?
I think there is only one candidate.
Yeah, there were no other names. That's a real secure leader. A guy who knows he has the confidence of his people. You get to vote, but only for me, and none of you can actually vote against me.
Mehdi, we do not want to end up in a situation with 6 prime ministers in 80 years.
Yeah. So you prefer a dictatorship?
No, we prefer a system that works for the benefit of the Chinese people.
I've not said a word about what works or not. You got great economic growth.
Look at the
But you're a
economic
dictatorship.
There is no dictatorship, Mehdi.
You just admitted
want me to,
that there's no name on the ballot paper, no votes.
Why would you, on one hand, be attacking democracies for the fact that they can switch around so much, while also claiming to be a democracy which would mean you would have that same flaw, by the way. Why would you do that if you're trying to argue that you're actually a democratic system and not a dictatorship? And then, I mean, because the argument would be, actually, dictatorships are cool because in democracies, you don't have long-term vision or as good long-term vision and you switch around all the time, etc. But that's not the argument he's making. He's making the argument, no, we're not a dictatorship, but also here's the arguments about why democracy is not that good. What? You can't do both. You can't be like, I am a democracy, but also here's why democracy is not good. Doesn't make sense to me.
Votes against him, and they all just follow him. That's a dictatorship.
Mehdi, when you have
You can say my name multiple times, but it's a dictatorship.
How many candidates are there on the ballot paper?
How many? What? King and queen?
When the king succeeds the queen,
yes.
How many candidates are there on the ballot paper?
How many?
Does that make Britain not a democracy?
Well, you're asking the wrong guy. I'm a Republican, so I think we should be a full democracy and get rid of the monarchy. And I can say that here. You can't say that in China.
You cannot take any action against that.
Yes, I can, actually. I can go out on the street. I can hold up a
That's
placard
not true,
and say,
Mehdi.
let's get rid of King
First
Kong.
lie he said. First lie Mehdi has said. He is completely wrong. I could absolutely go to China and say that Great Britain should get rid of the king and queen. Absolutely wrong, Mehdi.
I can create a whole protest outside Buckingham Palace. You can't do that in China. You can't even put one other person's name on a ballot paper. That's how insecure your leader is.
Mehdi, I'm a lawyer. In my capacity as a lawyer, I can give you a long list of things that you cannot do regarding the monarchy here in Britain.
I'm not debating that. I'm saying that we have an elected government. We get to choose. We get to swap 6 prime ministers, God help us. But we get to pick everyone in this room who's a citizen gets...
Yeah, because after that chaos in the Conservative Party, what did the people do? They chose to go for Labour, Keir Starmer, and switch. Could they do that in China? No, they couldn't. You could argue that they wouldn't have the instability as of right now, but they couldn't make that type of radical change. A radical, quote unquote, like switching all of the cabinet minister, all of the officials, the party, their beliefs about the economy. You can't do that because there's only one party, and that's the problem within one party democracy. You can have democracy with somewhat within the elites of the party structure, within their belief system, but you can't have a diverse set of beliefs outside of that, or push an agenda outside of that. And when the party agrees to go one way, under this administration, you go that way. It's a unified party vote.
To pick.
Listen, you end up with your mini budget, which bankrupt the whole country.
But that's an honest answer, Victor. But Victor, I admire that because that's an honest answer. Your answer is, it's a dictatorship that works. At least say that.
No.
No, you can't. You keep dodging. One minute you say, it's not a dictatorship. Then I show you it is. You say, but it's working. We've got growth.
Mehdi,
pick one.
Mehdi, if that is your point, I will seriously urge you to do more homework about how the Chinese system works.
Okay, let's talk about the Chinese system, because I did a little bit of homework. Did you know that Xi Jinping put his name in the Constitution? That's weird.
Well,
the leader of the country put his own name in the Constitution.
Donald Trump, if he wins that and he catches wind of this, oh my God. Can we... sir, the articles of the Constitution, you say you want to do, you talk about the amendments and stuff and, amendment, the 19th Amendment, etc. You want to do an amendment? Yeah? And what amendment? Oh, Amendment 0. Amendment 0 to put he would do amendments. He wouldn't do Amendment 20, Amendment 21. It'd be, can we do Amendment 0? More secretive than Amendment 1 and 2 and 3. Oh, it'd be great. I want it. I want it now. I want to see Trump win just to see him try to put his own name in the Constitution and figure out what he would write.
He's president. No one's done that since Mao. None of the other Chinese presidents, not Hu Jintao, not your old boss Deng Xiaoping, none of them did it. Did they? Or am I wrong?
It's wrong.
Who did it?
The Chinese constitution has been most frequently amended compared with any other country.
Am I wrong about what I just said with my little bit of homework?
Mao's name was put into the constitution.
That's what I said.
Deng's name was put into the constitution.
Not while he was president.
And Jiang Zemin's name was put into the constitution.
Not while they were sitting presidents, and you know that. Tell our crowd here, not while they were president. They didn't do it themselves.
According to my recollection, each of these names were put into the constitution
not while they were sitting
while
presidents.
the leaders were still alive.
Okay, so I'm right.
Wait, while they were still alive. Look at that last second pivot. Vroom.
I love the little
swerve.
Even Donald Trump, one of the great narcissists of our time, has not proposed yet putting his name into the US Constitution. If you are the president of China, you're elected without any opponents, no names on the ballot paper, 0 votes against you. You put your name in the Constitution. 6-year-olds are taught about Xi Jinping thought in primary school. That is not just a dictatorship, that is a cult of personality.
I don't think China believes in personal.
So why are 6-year-olds learning about Xi Jinping thought? I'm pretty sure no 6-year-olds learned about Liz Truss's mini budget. Victor.
The Chinese system is such that once you orient the country in one direction, everyone follows the suit.
Do they follow or are they ordered to follow? They don't follow out of choice.
No, it's like a vehicle with 4 wheels. Here, you have 4 wheels aligned in different directions, opposing directions. In China, the 4 wheels of a car all lined up in one direction.
Well, they don't.
Going forward.
Well, they don't, Victor. Let me give you an example.
Why does he keeps making all the best arguments for dictatorship? But no, we're not a dictatorship. We're not a dictatorship. But man, when you have structure and people don't disagree and everyone's aimed in the same way, the same direction, everything's so great.
That's the Chinese way of doing it.
Former Foreign Minister Qin Gang was removed from his post and has not been seen in public since June.
Dylan, is this guy espousing Xi Jinping thought? Pretty low level Xi Jinping thought. See, I'm pretty deep into the scholarly thought of Xi Jinping thought. I would say I'm a higher tier. You have different tiers of Xi Jinping thought. You know, it's a little bit like what was that? What are they called? Scientology. You know, I'm a alpha beta Xi Jinping thoughter. I'm quite high up the tree.
2023. A few months later, China's Defense Minister, General Li Shangfu, disappeared from public view for months, has now been expelled from the party, accused of corruption. That's at least 2 ministers that disappeared just in the last year. With apologies to Oscar Wilde, to lose 1 minister might be unfortunate. To lose 2 is careless, is it not?
Do you know the point I want to make? This means China is really merciless in dealing with corruption of all kinds, even among the highest.
Your foreign minister and defense minister. Imagine Antony Blinken and Lloyd Austin just disappeared tomorrow. We don't know where they are. We've never seen them again. That's not normal, Victor.
Listen, corruption is rampant in China.
How do we know they're corrupt? They just disappeared. Where's the trial? Where's the trial, Victor?
Finish my point. Corruption of all kinds in China need to be dealt with.
So where's the trial?
Mercilessness.
So where's the trial? Where's the trial of the former foreign minister? We don't even know where he is.
Mehdi, those things you don't know doesn't mean doesn't happen.
Where is the
there was this like rising star within China, and he became the foreign minister, and he was like really bombastic and kind of like the symbol of the wolf warrior diplomacy that China was putting forward. And then he just kind of disappeared. And we still don't know where he is, I believe. People say it has to do with corruption and some stuff, but we really don't know the full story.
Trial for this man you're just accusing of corruption.
Qin Gang was my good friend for more than 20 years.
Where is he then?
He is involved in corruption.
Where is he?
And he is dealt with very swiftly.
Where is he, Victor?
Regardless of
He's your good friend. You don't know where he is.
Regardless
where
of the
is the former foreign minister of China?
Position.
This is not a hard question. We're not asking where Rehan's brother in the middle of Xinjiang is that you can dodge. Where is the former foreign minister of China who disappeared? And by the way, he wasn't accused of corruption. The spokesman came out and said he has health reasons. Then corruption came later, by the way. Where did he go, your friend?
That means there is a...
That is the true fact check.
Process. And the process...
So the process starts with one lie that he's ill, and then the next lie is he's corrupt.
He may be ill. You never know.
I mean, he's probably ill after he's been in a Chinese prison.
He may be ill now.
Yeah,
you never know.
Exactly.
But at least
where is he?
He's doing everything. He's just like pondering of, does he have a bellyache right now? He's doing everything possible not to answer the question.
Is corruption.
Last question.
That's the point.
Where is he?
He's somewhere in China. You will never see him. He is among the 1.4 billion people.
And no, it's not just him. There's many other people who have disappeared. The previous defense minister disappeared. The Ministry of Industry and Technology disappeared. The former Interpol president disappeared. In China, you just disappear if they don't like you. That's the rule of law in China.
I'm so happy they disappear, because if they keep doing their job, they will bring greater disaster.
Victor, be careful what you wish for, because everyone's watching this show, and if you get something wrong tonight, maybe you disappear.
If I disappear, I hope you will bail me out.
I'd have to find you first, and China's apparently a big country. I want to bring in Stephen Chan, professor at the University of London School of...
So the thing is, what he's arguing is he's arguing the efficiency of dictatorship. Oh, you're doing something bad. There's no like judicial review. You don't need to have like a jury of your peers. You just take them and and he's gone. The efficiency of dictatorship. Again, he's arguing again and again and again. The efficiency of dictatorship. The efficiency of one-party rule. The efficiency of all aimed in the same direction. But he's adamant that he's representing a democracy, a type of democracy. I still do not buy it.
Oriental African Studies. Stephen, Xi Jinping's policies, his crackdown on
But also, can I just say that is true, that is efficient. But the problem with, no judicial review means that he can selectively choose to go after corruption, go after the corruption of your enemies while still keeping your political allies safe. Or choosing to just, for example, make up charges to get rid of people who might just be problematic. And so that is the fear that people have in China. Either selective enforcement or trumped up charges, not to mention even all of the stuff on the books that shouldn't be on, the immoral stuff, the arresting people for just like critiquing the government, etc.
I mean, China was never a democracy. Other presidents were also dictatorial. But can we agree that Xi Jinping is on a different level when it comes to repression at home, the consolidation of power? I assume you disagree with Victor's description of him as part of a, four-wheel car all driving in the same direction happily.
He certainly consolidated his power. He is a very, very strong president. And I think that the real test of all of this is how China has treated Hong Kong, with the increasing clampdown on dissent and free expression of opinion, when they were meant to have a degree of freedom and a one country, two system way of approaching life. We can't see any evidence of vibrant debate in China. And I'd note that one of the great disappointments of my life is when I read Chinese academic works. Everyone toes a party line. No one does independent research to publish, as it were, anything critical of, for instance, not just Xi Jinping.
So can I just make an argument that I'm sure if we were to measure the most to least corrupt countries in the world, like if we look up a corruption index, and I'm sorry, we're just going to use the first one we find. Are we going to find countries that are more liberal-leaning, liberal democratic countries are going to be less corrupt or more corrupt, generally speaking? Transparency.org. We'll just do this one. Allow on. It looks like there's corruption everywhere, unsurprising, but like the least corrupt countries. Let's go to number 1. Denmark, then Finland, then New Zealand, then Norway, then Singapore. There you go. You got a little change there. Then Sweden, then Switzerland, then Netherlands, then Germany, then Luxembourg, then Ireland. The vast majority of these are institutionalized, liberal, constitutional democracies, representative democracies. Rule of law based. You can say on one hand that being able to say you're corrupt is good, but when you selectively enforce it and you leave your allies alone, and you can also just trump up the charges, or the people who are involved in enforcing are sometimes corrupt themselves, you come into a million different problems. And that is why China has a massive corruption problem, and they're trying to deal with it right now. And this is one way to deal with it, and it'll have some effect, but is it better than institutionalizing transparency and reform? I would beg to differ.
Anything critical about Chinese foreign policy?
Well, they might disappear.
They might not get promoted in any case.
Rehan Assad is a senior fellow at the
Transparency.org is not an academic source. I didn't say it was an academic source. I just pulled the first one. If you guys can find me a list of the least corrupt countries in the world that are not mostly made of institutionalized democracies, then send it my way. But I think every single one you find is going to be mostly that.
Atlantic Council International Human Rights Law. Rehan, in part 1 we talked in depth about the repression against the Uyghurs and your own personal situation. In 2014, Xi Jinping privately called for an all-out struggle, quote, against terrorism and to show absolutely no mercy after a visit to Xinjiang. How much do you believe Xi Jinping is driving what's happening in Xinjiang? How much do you think he's responsible for the repression in China?
Well, the matter of the fact is that all of which happened under current administration. Right? So many scholars are attributing to him. It happened under his reign. He's the one who said absolutely no mercy. Stamping out roots and branches of the Uyghurs, breaking out their connection. And these are the policies implemented under his leadership. So it's very hard to separate Xi Jinping from the current policy, Xinjiang.
Martin Jakes, author of the best-selling book, When China Rules the World. You heard Victor talk about, well, we can't be a dictatorship because we're doing so well, the economy's doing amazing, we don't have Liz Truss mini budgets, etc. But then you get into the debate about, can dictatorship and growth coexist? Do you need to have democracy to go alongside that? And I think about the pandemic, Martin, and I think about China's reaction to the pandemic, is that where the dictatorship, the lack of transparency, the disappearances caught up with China? Because, of course, there was a black hole in China in terms of China's censorship methods, its draconian policies, the zero COVID policy, the crackdown, which led, some people say, to over 1 million, 2 million deaths. We saw protests in buildings, people screaming. Was that a moment where China actually collided with reality and said, this system, it can't survive long term?
Well, I beg to differ on the question of the pandemic, because actually for 2 years, 2020 and 2021, actually China did, under the circumstances, extremely well and well outperformed the West. And the reasons for it are quite complicated. You've got to take a very different kind of system. Now, one of the problems with the discussion, I think, so far on this question is that the country, it sounds as if the country doesn't work. If you say dictator, despot, all these kind of words.
I didn't say that, but
no,
that's how
but if, and you say, not you personally, but and one says there's no discussion. This is, I think this is absolutely untrue. So what we're presenting here is not an accurate picture. We've got
It's not about accurate picture, it's about balance, right?
Yeah,
so I don't deny what you're saying, but you're British. You would think it was a political earthquake if the Foreign Secretary and the Defence Secretary disappeared in the space of 6 months. Not arrested, disappeared, surely.
Yeah, and there is something on. Look, Qin Gong was a friend of mine as well. And I don't know what's happened to him. And I think it is odd. Certainly to our eyes, it's weird that this can happen. But I think that the thing is that...
I was looking up his book, and it seems to have gotten like a mixed reception. I can't really make heads or tails of it when China rules the world. I'll look more into it, though. Seems to be... It's you know, China rising, America declining book.
We've got to try and get beyond cardboard cutouts when we're talking about China and understand how it really works.
Okay. Let's bring in our audience who've been waiting here in London's Conway Hall. I'm going to go to the lady there on the fourth row. Yes, you.
My question is, as a dissident from Hong Kong, knowing that I cannot express freely in Hong Kong or in the UK without risking other people in trouble, I also know that you just now made claims about there's free speech in China, and it's possible to criticize the Chinese government just now again. Can you please demonstrate that free speech and tell us what are Xi Jinping's 2 worst mistakes in the past 5 years?
Great question.
If you can demonstrate to us that it's okay to criticize Xi Jinping, the Chinese government, and China, or even just say Xi Jinping kind of resembles Winnie the Pooh, would be good enough for me. Thank you.
Victor, do you want to take that question?
Well, thank you. I would say China need to make more prompt, take more prompt actions in dealing with the dramatic aging population in China and the dramatic demographic decline.
Do you think Xi Jinping's to blame for not being fast enough on aging?
No, I think the whole Chinese government, including...
Oh, so it's not a critique of Xi. Come on. There has to be something. Is he perfect? Is he just like, is Xi Jinping like the astral projection of the Chinese spirit? I mean, he must make some mistakes. Come on.
The Central Committee, State Council, local government need to take actions quickly.
Like, what about, okay, easy critique. Even like the most diehard tanky communists I know will probably concede on this. You have to, if you're going to go after corruption, you have to go after corruption universally. You cannot just exclude your allies, or you're going to continue to perpetuate the culture of corruption within your own party.
To reverse that dramatic aging population problem and demographic.
We're not going to get a criticism out of you. Let's go back to the audience. Let's go to the gentleman here in the tie. Yes, you.
Yeah, Alex. Sorry, Alex Vines from Chatham House. My question is debt. So there's been very bad riots, for example, that's been in the news in Kenya. Some of that debt that's been causing the problem is owed to China. So the question is, how is China going to handle the increasing pressures for debt cancellation? At least 17 African countries are in particular distress this year. Thank you.
I understand the Chinese debt in these large-scale connectivity projects is only a small portion of the overall national debt, because they own debt to the United States, to Britain, to the international financing institutions, etc. They not just own debt to China, but to many other countries. That's the reality. Secondly, there is accusation about the death trap, which is completely wrong and false. Because if you want to do connectivity project, major project finance things, you need to have equity as well as debt. Debt is an indispensable part of the packaging.
Okay, let's go back to the audience. I say I'll take this gentleman at a time, then go to the back, then we'll go to that gentleman there. You next, after this one.
My name is Sonam Frazi. I would like to ask you a question on Tibet. I was born in Tibet before the Chinese invasion of Tibet. Unfortunately, 1.2 million Tibetans have died since, and we have been made refugees. My question is, Tibet, after 74 years of Chinese rule, is still under lockdown. No journalists, no individual tourists, even Tibetans are not allowed to see their families. What is China afraid of to keep Tibet in such a tight control and Tibetans in such an inhuman existence in our own country?
Sir, ever since the Yuan dynasty, if not even earlier, Tibet has been part of China. Through different...
Okay, so guess what? There's periods where also Tibet was not part of China. And you know what that means? That means throughout all of human history, Tibet has not been a part of China, so Tibet could be considered a separate entity. Many countries have formed that way. Many. Most countries do not just appear out of nowhere. Like there was ancient Chinese and then there's modern Chinese. No, it's like different identities and different tribes, different cultures, like change and die and get genocided and cover and morph and get combined with foreign cultures. And but Tibet has existed as a separate entity from China. That's the first thing. And the majority of that had to do with the treatment of the Tibetan people. But he immediately, of course, just remind everyone, Tibet's part of China. Tibet's part of China. Tibet is part of China. And if you forgot, Tibet is part of China.
Dynasties, different historical periods. I can assure you, during your lifetime and mine, Tibet will always be part of China.
Why are you so insistent on ruling places that don't want to be ruled by China?
No, Tibet is part of China.
Taiwan, they're not happy in Xinjiang.
Tibet being part of China doesn't depend on whether you like it or not. It's a megatrend of our time.
A megatrend.
And you need to accept.
So he's just saying it's a fact of life. It is what it is. We the winners, WWW, you the losers, LLL. It is what it is. Winners and losers, it's human development. But the thing is, like, separating Tibet and separating Xinjiang from China at this point, in my mind, is like, it would basically be considered a lost cause. There are some people who continue to be activists on it, and I respect them immensely, but I would consider it almost like a lost cause. Taiwan isn't a lost cause. There's an ocean that separates them. It has its own unique history, distinct culture. It's never been part of the Chinese Communist Party or system or any part of that. And it's has a strong ally that can back it up. And it's been separate now for like 75 years. There's soon the generation that even knows what it was like before that separation, and it was like Japanese occupation before that, will be dead. So like there is a different pathway. There is like hope here. So I'm hoping that by ringing the bell and making it clear to everyone, hey, there's an ocean that divides them and they don't want to be part of China, that can give some support to Taiwan internationally. Because the thing that really angers me most about the Taiwanese conversation is every time I see Americans talking about it, every time I see streamers talking about it too, I mean, most of the time, so little of the conversation is centered on what do the Taiwanese want, what would be best for the Taiwanese, when we're talking about the future of their island. We're instead talking about what would be the best to just like please the government in Beijing, what would be the best to just cool relations, instead of what would be the best for the 25 million people that are going to actually have to live with the future of the decisions we make about Taipei and the mountains and the beautiful beaches and everything that makes Taiwan, Taiwan.
That before you will feel free to go back to China, to visit Tibet.
You sound like you're threatening the man.
No, I'm not.
You said you have to accept that before you can go back. He's from that place.
You live in peace in Britain, that's good.
But he's a refugee.
But if you want to go back to Tibet, acknowledge Tibet is part of China, period.
And what if he doesn't? He can't go back to his home?
You cannot go back. Because China doesn't want to see anyone advocating for the independence.
What is he gonna do? That old man's gonna go back and he's gonna, I am the new, is that the new Khan right there? Sorry, I don't know enough about Tibetan culture to make like culture accurate references, okay? Is he gonna get on horseback and he's gonna lead the Tibetans in glorious battle? He's gonna sack Beijing and he's gonna make Tibet and then Greater Tibet? Come on. He's an old man.
And what if he doesn't? He can't go back to his home?
You cannot go back. Because China doesn't want to see anyone advocating for the independence of Tibet.
Why can't
No
China...
way. That will never happen.
Victor, why can't China rest on its own merits? Why the bullying and the threats? We're going to break you to pieces, Taiwan. You can't go back until you sign this document or that declaration. Why the insecurity? Second biggest economy in the world, major power. You sound so insecure.
China's security rests on the principle that there is only one China.
It rests on this old man agreeing with the government. Hey, guess what? There's a lot of old people in the force of Alabama and Georgia and even Maryland and states all across the country and even in urban centers who don't disagree with the government, criticize the government. And guess what? It keeps on rolling. The car keeps on driving, even if some of the wheels are squeaky.
No. And Taiwan is part of China, Tibet is part of China, and Xinjiang is part of China. Period.
And even if the people there don't want to be part of it, you don't give a damn.
The majority of the people live happily as Chinese citizens.
Did you do a vote?
I will go with you to Tibet.
We're going to go to Tibet and we're going to talk to all the Tibetans.
And possibly
I
also
can go to
Taiwan.
Tibet, but the guy who's from there can't go there. You sound ludicrous when you say this stuff, I'm sorry to say. Let us go back to the audience. Gentleman at the back and then this gentleman here.
My name is Aziz Isa Elkün. I am a British Uyghur, except Rehan. And my question, for many in the Uyghur diaspora, we have not been allowed contact with our families at home within the Uyghur Autonomous Region since 2017, when Chinese government started detaining more than 3 million plus Uyghurs into their high-tech surveillance concentration camps. My question to you, sir, what's the Chinese government trying to hide from us? Second, why can't we not talk freely with our families?
Okay. Yet another Uyghur. So many Uyghurs, the same story, the same questions.
I'm always very happy to see wherever I go a Uyghur person, because I do consider the Uyghurs as my brothers and sisters. On one condition, though.
Part of me is starting to feel sorry for your actual brothers and sisters, I'll be honest with you.
On one condition, though, Uyghurs need to acknowledge that Xinjiang is part of China. That's a big precondition. If you do not
is that how he
accept
starts every conversation? Is that how he starts with every conversation with every Uyghur or every Tibetan? He's like, hello, Mr. Tibetan. Ah, man, I'm happy we could join in unity as we are brothers on this fine afternoon, as we sip tea and chat about how Xinjiang is part of China and how Tibet is part of China on this fine day. Oh, oopsie doopsie, I dropped my little book. Just some Xi Jinping. Just come on. It's the same point over and over and over again. If he diversified his arguments a little bit, but every single time it's like any Uyghur comes up to criticize the government, the response immediately is disagree, it's part of China. A lot of these critiques are not even like, oh, we believe that there should be an East Turkmenistan or any of that. It's just, hey, the abuses and the surveillance is bad and we don't want it there. He hasn't even touched on that because he's just so focused on reinforcing China's nationalist image.
Condition.
Hold on.
You are not my brother or sister.
Hold on, so that's fine. You don't have to be brothers and sisters, but can he not talk to his family?
It depends on where your family is. There are indeed Uyghur separatists who want to promote separatism of Uyghur,
but what about the people who are not separatists who just disappear?
Turn Xinjiang into East Turkmenistan. This will never happen. Listen to this. Call your friends to stick to the one China policy.
He just wants to talk on the phone to a family member.
years old. 7 years I didn't speak to my mother. I want to speak to my mother. I am British Uyghur. I want to speak to my mother. Do you understand?
Literally support one China policy, support Xinjiang being part of China.
Victor.
Period.
Do you have no heart to see this man who can't speak to his 82-year-old mother? Is she a separatist?
I wish your mother is here in this hall talking to you. And
why don't you let her go? So then maybe she could.
But then on one condition, in China, zero tolerance of any separatist movement.
An 82-year-old woman is a threat to China. What does that say about China?
I hope she's not a separatist, but if she's a separatist, she will be dealt with by law. Period.
An 82-year-old, yeah, she's just finagling AK-74s in a cave.
Victor, before we finish, I have one question for you. We're in the UK. We're in Conway Hall, historic free speech society. Could we do a show like this? Could I interview you like this? Could Rehan come be on a panel like this in Beijing, in, say, the Beijing International Convention Center? Could we do a show like this? Audience members freely ask questions. You take questions from everyone. No one's vetted. No one's threatened. Could we do this in Beijing?
Mehdi, if you ask me to line up all the support, you will do that. Really, I can assure you that.
A show where every audience member gets to speak freely. No one turns up at their house afterwards.
For many European countries, you do not need a visa to go to China. Pick up your luggage and buy a ticket.
I'm not asking foreigners.
Beijing.
Victor, I'm not asking foreigners to come. I'm saying could a Chinese audience turn up and ask whatever they want, criticize Xi Jinping, criticize the government, ask you questions, talk about Uyghurs. Could you do it in Beijing?
Mehdi, in China, don't criticize our president.
So we couldn't do this show?
Unless you
well, I'm
have
glad you
a
answered the
very
question.
positive, constructive proposal to make.
From the horse's mouth. Don't criticize unless it's positive.
Is not the only goal. Criticism with constructive purposes
is a goal.
Will be a better free speech.
Free speech is a goal we cherish on this show. I'm glad to have offered you a platform for free speech. I wish you could offer me one back. Victor Gao, thank you for your time. Thank you to the audience in Conway Hall. And thank you to everyone at home for watching this episode of Head to Head.
Okay, so they didn't include, there's one more clip that they did not include. I guess they cut, but I want to watch is them talking about Ukraine. Here it is.
Paramount.
I want to watch this because
I'm glad you brought up.
This was interesting because I think we missed this, or I missed it.
So I'm glad you brought up sovereignty and territorial integrity. Your position is that that is paramount. Sovereignty.
That's paramount.
Okay.
For the Chinese
if it's
nation,
paramount,
that's paramount.
If it's paramount, why isn't the Chinese government supporting Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity when it comes to occupied Crimea and the 4 regions in eastern Ukraine that Russia is illegally annexed?
Now, remember when he said earlier, he said that China can't give up an inch. It's against its inch. It can't. Sovereignty, territorial integrity is paramount. It's paramount to China.
If it's paramount, why isn't the Chinese government supporting Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity when it comes to occupied Crimea and the 4 regions in eastern Ukraine that Russia is illegally annexed?
Mehdi, the Ukrainian situation is very clear. China from day one called for ceasefire immediately because
that's not what I asked, with respect, Victor.
Listen.
No, with respect, that's not what I asked.
China has
Why
always...
are you not respecting and calling for the support of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity? We all just heard you say that's paramount for China. Why not for Ukraine?
Mehdi, from day one, China has always supported Ukraine as a sovereign, independent country.
But no. Support them in their dispute for their territorial integrity, not the fact that they exist. Okay, everybody but the Russians agree that the Ukrainians exist.
Full member of the United Nations.
Actually, from day one, China has not condemned the Russian invasion even once. Point me to one quote.
Mehdi,
there isn't one.
If condemning Russia can solve the war, everyone should condemn.
That's not. Nobody said China just condemning Russia would solve the war. It's a question of the hypocrisy or the double standard.
So Russia invasion.
Victor, that's not what I asked. Do you condemn the Russian invasion?
No, China says.
Do you?
The situation.
Does Victor Gao condemn the Russian invasion?
I do not support any invasion of any country.
You condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine?
I condemn the American invasion of Iraq.
Fantastic.
American
so do I.
Invasion of Afghanistan.
So do I. Great.
Yes.
We're doing great.
So
okay, so we both agree. Now, I condemn the invasion of Ukraine. Do you?
I condemn everything which led to.
Hold on, Victor. People are here listening to you.
See, so he says, I condemn the invasion of Iraq. I condemn the invasion of Afghanistan. Oh, so you condemn the Russian invasion of Ukraine? I condemn that there is a war and there's a lot of circumstances that lead up to it. It's a double standard. He does not want to criticize the Russians. He does not want to condemn them. He can't, and so he doesn't. And so they have to keep the ultra-neutral position, because on one hand, if Russia is assisting China in some ways, and they are assisting Russia with CNC machines, etc., that helps their war effort, and they're buying a lot of exported Russian petroleum, etc. So he can't just like completely be like, oh yes, Ukraine all the way, we shouldn't be doing that yet, etc., etc. But on the other hand, if he says, oh, you know, Ukraine doesn't matter, then why would anybody care about China's territorial integrity when it comes to Taiwan or their claims of sovereignty and not an inch of territory? But my argument would be, if you're saying not an inch, how could you ever encourage the Ukrainians to accept a deal where they give up an inch of territory, which I assume would be part of any Chinese compromise?
You just all lives matter to us, all right?
While also saying, you know, so because from China's perspective, it's the Ukrainians have to give up their land for peace, but the Chinese have, if necessary, have to start a war in order to reclaim their land. So for me, it feels like, you know, a contradiction.
Ceasefire is the most
I agree with you. So far we've agreed. Ceasefire is important.
Ceasefire.
American invasion of Iraq was wrong. We agree? You said it. You said it a moment ago.
Afghanistan, Syria.
Agreed. I'm with you on all of them.
Yes.
Okay. Russian invasion of Ukraine is wrong. You condemn it.
No, I think we need to really go back into the history to see what exactly happened.
Victor, you can condemn every American invasion, but you will not condemn the Russian invasion. And then you say everyone should respect China's sovereignty. You don't respect Ukraine. You can't bring yourself to condemn the Russian invasion.
You need to listen very carefully as to what Russia is saying.
I'm listening so carefully to you tonight, I'm not hearing condemnation.
No, Russia says no NATO membership for Ukraine or over my dead body.
Yeah.
That's their position.
But that doesn't justify violating national sovereignty. You said it's paramount.
But you need to understand, what does that mean?
I understand, but
that means...
I'm agreeing.
But there was no, hey, Ukraine, you're going to join NATO in 2022. France was still against it. Germany was still against it. The Turks were still against it. The Hungarians are still against it now. So they weren't about to join NATO. So a settlement had not been reached. And the Russians then chose to expand the war that they started back in 2014 and try to just knock out Ukraine's sovereignty in its entirety. How could that not be something to condemn? Especially if your main goal here is peace.
I agree with you. There's a lot of issues with NATO. I agree with all that. But the invasion of Ukraine, the annexation of provinces, that's illegal. China believes in national sovereignty. Why can't you say that?
China always supports the full sovereignty and territorial integrity
of Ukraine
and
condemns the Russian annexation.
China supports Ukraine as a full member of the United Nations, entitled to everything that UN Charter applies to any country.
But the American invasion of Iraq was wrong, and the Russian invasion of Ukraine was ...
No, Mehdi.
Nope,
I don't say that.
Okay, I gave you many opportunities.
Victor Gao, everyone. Voice of China. The military is a fighting force of some capacity, made up of usually largely volunteers. They train them in shooting and fighting and such, so they can, oh my God, so they can kill people.